get to know what you're actually doing with your money before you even start thinking about getting in a community about it, because you actually have to deal with real facts, not just what your aspirational budget is, but what your literal spending is.
Well, friends, we're here for this week's culture segment. You know that we talk about all the things here at the Boundless Show that are going to guide you toward maturity in your faith, in your life, in your relationships. And so today we are going to have a little convo about money, and we're going to do it with two folks who are experts in this area. They are authors of the book Stewards, Not Owners: The Joy of Aligning Your Money with Your Faith. I would love to introduce you to Bill and Dana Wichterman. Hey, you two.
Hey, Lisa. Good to be
Hello.
with you.
So great to have you both here. So you guys have had quite a varied individually careers here, including Bill. I know you were in the White House for a while. You've been on Capitol Hill a lot. Dana, obviously, you've done some stuff in nonprofits as well as being a co-founder of Faith Driven Entrepreneur. You've done some investor network stuff there. So a lot of now, you're living in DC now?
Just outside of DC in the Virginia side.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. So this is interesting because it's like how, I mean, just maybe a little pivot here, Rabbit Trail. How did you two find each other? Because this sounds you're pretty, I was going to say complimentary of one another, but at the same time, you're kind of both like doing the things in the same realm.
Well, some of that is because we've grown so much together in harmony in our calling and our vocation over our 37-year marriage. But yes, we met at adult Sunday school class in a church in Washington, D.C., and 2 years later got married.
That's great. That's really fun. And also encouragement for those who are listening that, yes, continue to go to church, continue to go to your Sunday school class, your small group. There are still good men and women out there who want to get married. So there's a whole little separate show we did right there, not even on the subject of money. Cool. All right. Well, we want to talk about your book, because this concept of stewardship, I think we all feel like, okay, this is kind of the Christian thing to talk about. We know we're called to be stewards in scripture and whatnot, but none of us really maybe understand what we're talking about and how this applies to us on the daily. So can one of you just maybe give an explanation of a stewardship mindset? Like, what are we talking about here? Because I think a lot of our audience is like, I can barely make it through the week. I'm paycheck to paycheck. I'm underemployed. I'm paying off student loan debt. And they're like, how would God want me to steward anything? So we might need to understand what stewardship is, first off.
Sure. Well, my view of stewardship that has really helped me is to think of that God is the master and I am the servant, but he has given me dominion over whatever realm it is, whether it's my home or my work, my friendships, my family. And that dominion, he's transferred authority, but he expects me to manage that well. And he will help us through the Holy Spirit all along the way, and through community, and through good counseling with Christian brothers and sisters. But to not think of owning anything. In fact, we don't even think of owning our own kids in a sense. They are God's first and then ours, in the sense of ours to steward and parent. If God owns everything, including my home, it means that, and my car, it means that I would always be ready to deploy it if he tells me to use it for the good of someone else, but it doesn't mean giving all your money away, giving all your possessions away. We feel that God does ask that of some people, but that's few and far between. For the rest of us, he just asks us to manage it well under his authority. And I think when we think of that, then it releases you from the guilt of feeling like, oh, okay, well, it's an either or type of process. Right.
Yeah. I like what you're saying, Dana, about deploying like what we've been given. I mean, it's almost like you could kind of survey what you have, whether what's in your bank account, what you own, what you have around you. And it is like, when is God going to call me to pick this up? And it might be giving it, or it might be using it, or it might be lending it. I think that's really cool. I'd love to back up a little bit and have y'all describe how our family of origin plays into this, because both of you kind of came from different family experiences, different understandings of money. And I think a lot of people think, well, this is just how I was raised, or this is what I quote unquote got from my parents. And so that's just who I am or what I do. So talk a little bit about the differences with what you experienced as kids and how that played into or informed how you maybe even saw money as young adults prior to all that you've learned.
So we don't have the same backgrounds financially, Lisa. We each have different. Dana thought I was a guy from the other side of the tracks because she grew up in a very wealthy area, wealthy family. But oddly, she didn't think she was wealthy. She thought she's middle class, and I grew up just middle class. But in terms of what that meant for us, so we had different family origins. Dana's mom, very frugal, very good about saving money. My parents, very good about spending everything they had, but not going into debt.
Hmm.
So all of us have baggage on money. Few of us kind of come out without some sort of a baggage. And I think the issue is rethinking money, and not in terms of our family, but in terms of God. And I remember the excitement I had when we first got married and we started thinking about stewarding our money. For the first time, when we were in our 20s, I started to see how God cares about what we do with our money, and that this was an expression of my faith in God, and that in fact we see our money as a love letter to God.
Hmm.
And Dana likes to say, would you be comfortable showing God your credit card statement, your debit statement? Where's your money going? And obviously he can see it already, but that sense of like, is it something that you're proud of, or is a lot there you think, oh, I'm not doing right with this? So I think rethinking it in terms of scripture and Christian community is the starting point for thinking about all of your money as belonging to God.
Yeah, that's great. And I definitely want to get into that a little bit. I'm kind of cracking up because I know, Dana, you mentioned somewhere just your growing up this idea of like washing out plastic bags, because that was 100% my mom. Totally got that from her. Although now I'm like, I feel like I'm more measured because it's like, not all plastic bags, but definitely those ones with the legit zippers. I mean, we're not wasting those. Come on, those can be reused. Okay, good. I'm glad I'm glad you're with me on that. Okay, I want you to talk about, you guys have an example in a couple, some friends of yours, that is pretty wild. I mean, not everyone is going to know someone like this who is so aspirationally like forward thinking in what their relationship to money is as it relates to their faith and to their relationship with God. Talk about how that relationship, your friends, influenced you.
Yeah, so a couple called the Bockies. When we were young, in our 20s, they were maybe 10 years older than us, Bill, about that. So we considered them, our elders, our seniors, and they would teach adult Sunday school classes on all kinds of topics. But one of the main one was finance and stewardship. So they introduced this whole concept of stewardship of everything: time, talent, treasure, your ties, which are your relationships, and how can you deploy those for good. And so they would get very practical. They would go through all the principles in the Bible, but they would also get very practical about how different people can do that, and really that it doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor. In fact, in America, it's the poor that actually give poor Christians give more of their disposable income, to the church than rich Christians. Okay, in terms of percentage. And what I find is God, again, we all agree, God looks at the heart. And so I just don't think they taught us, don't wait to exercise your generosity muscles and your tithing muscles until you, quote, have made it and, gotten all financially settled. It's part of becoming mature in the Lord. And so just start doing a little bit of reducing your debt, a little bit of tithing, and just increase over time and pray about that. But that's that they taught us to really, that it's a muscle, it's a spiritual muscle that you have to exercise and be very intentional about. Because if you don't pay attention, it's not going to happen.
They actually had you quote them in the book, and I thought this statement was a little bit like I had to read it several times. This is almost to the level of like framing this, or I don't know, putting it on your laptop or something like that. It said, or they are known to say, stewardship isn't primarily about what you give away, rather, it's more about what you do with the money you keep. One of you explain that to us. What are they talking about there?
So it's easy to see God as kind of like the cosmic tax man.
Hmm.
With the government, what do? We pay our cut to the taxes that we owe to the government, and then we figure the government has nothing to say about the rest of our money. God is not that way, and it's easy to look at him that way. It's easy to think he just needs his tithe, and then I can decide the rest of it, and that's wrong. It's all his. There's nothing that we have that's not his. The abilities we have, even those things where you think, well, I worked hard for this ability to play soccer or play piano or can write software. No, this is all God-given abilities, and even the ability to grow into it. So when you see him as the steward of all things, it changes everything, because you're no longer thinking of this bright line of like, this is God's and this is mine. I mean, that was the problem with the rich young ruler in scripture, right? The guy was like, he was like, you would love him as a neighbor, as a deacon, a guy in your church. Sounds like his life was all together. He was really virtuous. He just didn't want to part with his money. And most of us are not called to give away all of our money like Jesus did to that guy. But we are called, all of us, to surrender all of our money. Surrendering all of our money is not the same as giving it all away. For most of us, that would be unwise, because we also look at Proverbs. We're supposed to be like the ant, not the grasshopper. Many of us don't save enough for the future. We need to be better savers. But as Dana said, many of us are big spenders, and we have to really restrain our appetites. But as we've grown in our stewardship journey, when we're making an investment versus cutting a check for a church or a nonprofit versus spending, the lines now are not these bright lines anymore in my mind, because they're all about, this is God's money, and the question is, how do we steward his money in a way that pleases him? And God is not a cosmic killjoy either. It says in 1 Timothy 6 that he gives us everything for our enjoyment, clearly talking about money, and Paul speaking to the wealthy at that point. And it's so interesting because there is a place for vacations and feasts and eating out and all that. And it's not the same for each of us, Lisa. We all have to like bring this before God, surrender it all, and say, what is okay? Certain things are not okay for me to spend money on, but they are for a friend, and vice versa.
Sure. So you're almost describing this as, I mean, this sounds like the process of looking at this, which is so counterintuitive to many of us, is almost a spiritual process. I mean, and you talk about this, there's a section in the book where you talk about stewardship, and you say, okay, how do you begin? You begin with prayer, you include community, and then you talk about the process of planning, which again, I think this is one of those things. Money is something that even Christians try to compartmentalize, of like what you said, Bill, give your 10% and then don't think about the rest. It's yours. You just do what you want. You've done your due diligence. But this idea of being prayerful about it and looking towards your community to walk this out. I mean, this is not unlike the steps we would tell a young adult to address their pursuit of dating or marriage prep or other areas of their life that maybe were more likely to put under the lordship of Christ. So talk about us, like specifically, I mean, talk about kicking this off with prayer, whether that's your financial journey or even everyday decisions, and then how you go about leaning into community. Why is it important for, I mean, we have listeners now that are like, oh my goodness, Bill and Dana, are you going to tell me to like get other people in my business about my money? Because I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. So explain what you mean by that.
Well, I would say another step is to understand actually how you're spending. So we say get to know what you're actually doing with your money before you even start um, thinking about getting in a community about it, because you actually have to deal with real facts, not just what your aspirational budget is, but what your literal spending is,
Mm.
and be analyzing that and think about that and pray over that of, Lord, what areas can we cut? And, what areas are essential? Do I need to get a renter in, like a second person in my apartment so I can have more income? There's all kinds of different creative ways. And one thing, Lisa, I'd like to say I wish I had thought more about when I was in my 20s was what I think is, it seems magical, but it's something that God has put in the universe of compounding interest. And it goes both ways. The magic of compounding interest, that if you're saving and investing well, over time, it just grows incredibly, right? But it also works the other way. If you get into debt, it can compound in the wrong way,
Mm.
and you can just carry on a heavy burden. And the Old Testament talks so often about don't be a slave to debt. And the reason partly is because he wants us to be free, to be generous, to have abundance so that we can share when people are in need. And when we are the ones enslaved to debt, we're the one that has to be the recipient of others who have planned more wisely. So I would love people to think more about understanding compounding interest in both ways and how that might apply in their 20s.
And it's good that you mentioned that. And I want to come back and circle back to then how do you become more transparent in the way that you're stewarding money in your community? But what you said, Dana, makes me think of another question. And that is, what would you say are clearly debt is going to be problematic for a number of Americans and especially younger Americans, because the assumption of, well, whether it's I need this latte or I need this vacation, we're going to make it happen. So problematic. What are a couple other sneaky things that you think maybe young adults aren't aware of in terms of stewardship of money, either good things that they're not doing or traps maybe that they're falling into?
It's so easy to not pay attention to where our money's really going. We keep track of every dollar that we spend for our entire marriage. Now, I know that can sound intimidating, but the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and it's a lot easier to keep track of your money today than it was when we started 35 years ago with ledgers and pencils and erasers and all. Now you pretty much download your debit card and your credit card into one of these programs. We use Quicken, and you assign everything a category. You could do it all for about an hour a month, if that, and now you've got a record. So I think, as Dana said, that's number one. We looked, by the way, Lisa, it was about we'd been married for about 10 years, and we were sitting on a pile of money, and we were feeling really good about it, and we were investing it, and it was that miracle of compound interest that Dana talked about. And I said, you know what? If we had gone on one $5,000 vacation a year, we would have no money right now, no savings. But over time, just a little bit of self-denial, I think, is absolutely critical. And think of it this way. You have to play mental games. Money is very mental. You think, oh, I can't live with less. Well, you did last year, didn't you? If you got a cost of living adjustment, if you got, a little bit of a raise, how about pretending on your next raise or cost of a living adjustment that you didn't get it? And just start shoveling it away. Just play those mental games. Pretend it didn't come through. When you get your tax refund, don't say, great, I got free money to spend. Say, nope, that's not, let's pretend it's not your money and shovel it into putting it away. So I think those are habits. And by the way, I think tithing still comes first. We are very much think tithing's important. We think it's a floor, not a ceiling. We think it's the first fruit before the tax man. So we tithe on gross. We are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Most of your listeners are among the wealthiest people who have ever lived. Now, I know a lot of your listeners right now, Lisa, are might saying, what? They don't know. I'm only making $40,000 a year. And I'm doing no. That puts you among the wealthiest people who have ever lived. Try one of those online calculators and see where you land. And they say, well, it's expensive in America. They're adjusting for a cost of living, right? They're already setting that in.
Mhm.
And it's very easy to tell ourselves we're not wealthy, which absolves us of responsibility when we look at it that way. Because Jesus said, to him who has been given much, much has been expected.
No, that's great, and that's really, I mean, fascinating to think, like, there are things, I mean, you're kinda getting into this, the part of the planning that I was talking about what it looks like to actually save money, live below your means, which you talk about in the book, beware of debt, investing, obviously, Dana mentioned the compound interest. So, what about this, just, because I wanna make sure I circle back to the role of community in decisions, and I know, you even give the example of picking a number here. I think you had mentioned one illustration with someone about anything above $2,500. You're going to get an informal council of Christian brothers to help you make this decision. Or that was the illustration of someone, a friend in your book. But what I mean that is not happening in the church. I could tell you that right now. So, what does that look like to even seed that conversation among your friends and those you're accountable to?
Yeah, well, I would say a couple places to go for community besides going to your pastor and saying, who in the church would you recommend that is already financially more mature and would be willing to mentor me? But the other one is to go to generousgiving.org and take a journey of generosity. It's called a jog. They're free. They do them both in person in all over the United States, but they also do them on Zoom, and it's a wonderful way of going through curriculum of what the Bible says about generosity and this whole idea of money and our relationship to it. And that is, we've gone through it twice now, and it's just been very transformational, um, for you, just resetting our heart, thinking about this, and then doing it in group where you actually can. We've made friends through those journeys where they're now we feel we can be transparent, we can open up about things, because I agree that money is something that is, you have to find someone who's safe to share your actual spending and this and that. But if we don't share with anyone, it if it stays in the dark, you don't have any accountability, and you don't have somebody else to maybe give you new ideas of how to do things. So I would say that. I would also say go to Crown Financial Ministries.org. They have phenomenal materials. They have Crown Financial Ministers that will help you think through, and advisors on how to structure your budget and your debt. And there may be some small groups in those kind of settings too. So we don't just find our mentoring in our actual church. We've found it outside in these other ministries that have a biblical framework and where people are already disposed to kind of thinking through how to manage things well.
By the way, the right website is crown.org for
Right.
Crown Financial Ministries. And
Okay.
Lisa, we also have a website with lots of resources on it, which is associated with a book. It's called stewardsnotowners.com. Stewardsnotowners.com. And it's a great place to go to hear testimonials and stories and find resources to send you on.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, just as we finish here, kind of in this last minute or so, I would love for you. You do talk about, because again, getting back to those of us who are believers who know that, not only will money not necessarily last into eternity, we all know the adage, you can't take it with you, but we will, and God is still concerned about this. What this concept of the finish line, sometimes we hear teaching in the church on store up your treasures in heaven. What is that going to look like? I think there's a lot of just weirdness around, jewels in our crown. Are we talking about like we're actually storing up literal treasures? What's this going to look at? I mean, there's obviously eternal value to us contributing to what my former pastor calls pushing back the effects of the fall, certainly building into others' lives, helping the poor and the oppressed. But this idea of the finish line, what are we actually aiming at when we're not just looking at our quick nap and counting our pennies? What's the eternal perspective for us here?
Well, there's a wonderful small book by Randy Alcorn called The Treasure Principle. And he talks about this, but I think we don't know exactly what rewards will look like in heaven, because we know we'll all experience abundance and joy. and we won't be experiencing jealousy of others. But what I think it will be is deep relationships of people that we will know in heaven, and they will be able to say, because of your gift to this ministry, or because of your time that you gave, or that kind word, this happened in my life. I turned the corner, I became a Christ follower, and now I'm here with you in heaven. So I think a lot of it will be relational, that we can't get back. We can never go back then to earth and then and redo that. This is our time on earth to be serving others, pointing them to Christ. And those are, I think, will be a lot of our joy and our reward in heaven. But then there's two kinds of finish line. I'll talk about one finish line, and then Bill can talk about the other. There are people that set a financial cap on just their spending for the year. And they say, we're going to have a financial lifestyle cap. And within that, we'll do our savings, spending, and investing. But then everything else this year, we give away. And then next year we'll reassess what are our needs, da, da, da. And so every year they have a finish line for that year, and they give away the rest. But then we also, Bill can talk about finish line for retirement. So
Yeah. The other way to look at the finish line is, let's say you're a teacher and you can retire at age 58 and you can get your annuity. And a lot of people do that, right? And they think, I'm done. I've worked now a lifetime here and I'm ready to enjoy this time of not working. Well, how about continuing to work and giving away everything you earn, and try it for 1 year?
Wow.
And people say, oh, that sounds radical. Well, you already said you don't need more money, right? That's what retirement means. We have enough money, we can stop working, work another year, and you'll write some big checks to your church and your ministries. And then see if that doesn't coax you into like, well, I think I could do that again and again and again. We have a friend, Henry Kasner, founder of the faith-driven investor movement, and he says, we ought not show up to heaven well rested. Work is not part of the fall. The thorns are part of the fall. The work preceded the fall in the garden, and we will work in heaven. Work is part of what it means to be made in God's image. God works. And so we have to be workers as well. And I think there's an American motif that was like, yep, what I'm working for is the weekend, or what I'm working for is when I can retire, when I can stop working entirely. And rest is important, Sabbath is important, but work is important.
Such a good word. Well, friends, we've been talking with Bill and Dana Wichterman here. I want to make you aware of this book that we've kind of been talking around. It is their book, Stewards, Not Owners, The Joy of Aligning Your Money with Your Faith. We're actually making this book available this week at Boundless for a gift of any amount. And you know, we do this a lot of times with friends that we have here on the show, and they have a resource. So how do you go about getting this? You go to Boundless.org, search for 911. And you're going to go ahead and click on the book cover there. You give a gift to Boundless, whatever you can afford, and we're going to send a copy of Bill and Dana's book to you as our thank you for supporting the work of Boundless. We also, incidentally, if you choose to retire and want to give us your salary for that final year of work, we will happily take that as well. And you heard it from Bill and Dana first, so you can make that happen. But that said, Boundless.org, search for 911, and you will see a copy of their book there, and you can get a copy to start your journey yourself, or continue the journey as it may be. So Bill and Dana, thanks again for being part of the show.
Thanks for having us.
thank you, Lisa.